Today we're ready to look at Tiglath-Pileser III. Oh boy, there's a good name for you to put on your list. Tiglath-Pileser. So many nicknames could come out of that. There's been a period of decline in Assyria until this point. Tiglath-Pileser gets them going again on a positive direction. And he's really considered the founder of the Assyrian Empire that eventually would control so much territory. He was a good administrator and a military leader. He got on the throne by taking it away. He seized it from those that were there. He fought a coalition in 743 that had been formed of different kings in the area of Syria. Uzziah may have been the leader of that coalition. And as a result, some Israelites were carried into captivity in 733. In 732, he was summoned by King Ahaz of Judah to drive away King Pekah of Israel and Aram, or Syria. Now, think about this. Here's the king of Judah, who should know better, calling upon a foreign power that worships a pagan god to come and help him against his relatives, the Israelites. He should have been trusting in God and done things God's way. But he calls on Assyria to come and help. Well, that's not a good situation. And Isaiah warned against this alliance in chapter 7 of Isaiah. Well, Tiglath-Pileser ended up coming in and taking Damascus and Iran. He annexed half of Israel under Pekah's leadership. So half of Israel is taken as a result of this. Ahaz, the king of Judah that called on Assyria to help, was not a good king. He was a very wicked king. He worshipped idols and even went so far as to burn children in sacrifice. So he was not a follower of God by any means. Well, Tiglath-Pileser was pretty successful coming into the area. At that point, Hoshea of Israel assassinated King Pekah, and he ended up reigning 9 years, all under the subjection of Assyria. So he had to pay tribute to Assyria because they had been conquered. Then he allied himself with Egypt when Tiglath-Pileser died, thinking this is a good time to rebel, to try to get away from Assyria, and joining with Egypt, they hoped that they would be able to get rid of the Assyrians. And so he withheld the tribute. Now that's going to bring us to another emperor following Tiglath-Pileser. But before we do that, I want you to see this bas relief. It's kind of hard to see, but this is an Assyrian chariot here. And you can see the men up here with bows and arrows, the horse, and then here's the lion that they're hunting. You see the lion? See his head there? He's standing up, he's got an arrow stuck in him. Maybe another arrow here. Can you see that at all? A little bit maybe? Here's a map showing the invasion, the campaign of the next emperor, whose name is Shalmaneser. So let's look at that. Well, before we go into that, I want to tell you something that happened somewhere else at this time. In Greece, there was a battle between 300 Argives and 300 Spartans. From what you know, which side do you think won? Spartans. You think maybe the Spartans won, right? Not exactly. 300 on both sides. They kept fighting until there were only 2 Argives left and only 1 Spartan. At that point, I guess they decided to just go home. Kind of an unusual battle. Everybody was killed but 3 out of 600. They had more brawn than brains, I might say. Okay, so on this map shows Shalmaneser, who is the next ruler, Shalmaneser V. And it's kind of hard to see what's going on here, so let's just look at the facts. He comes down into Israel and lays siege to Samaria, which was the capital of Israel, for 3 years. During that time, he captures over 20,000 Israelites. At that point, after Samaria had been besieged, or while it was being besieged, Hoshea, the king of Israel, remember he got there by killing the former king, he comes out and tries to negotiate with Shalmaneser, and Shalmaneser just imprisons him. So apparently that white flag didn't mean anything to Shalmaneser, if that's what they used. Well, Shalmaneser doesn't rule very long. He sets up this siege of Samaria, and then he dies. So you can see he's only ruling for 4 years. This is a painting that someone made of the surrounding of Samaria and the capturing of all those people. He's replaced by Sargon III. You got to write quickly, abbreviate. Not going to wait around for you. Sargon III claims credit for the fall of Israel. Now, Shalmaneser is the one that did all the heavy lifting, did all the work. But Sargon comes in and oversees the surrender, and so he takes credit for it. At this point, Israel is deported en masse. That means in whole groups. They're deported to other parts of the empire. I'll show you here this map. Here's Samaria, Israel, and they're deported from here. They take them up this direction, and then put most of them all the way over here in the area of Media. So quite a ways from home. And this is where the sect of the Samaritans begin. Now, what do you know about the Samaritans? You've heard of the Samaritans. What were the Samaritans?
They're like intermarried people.
Yeah, right. And it comes about as a result of this. Because when the Assyrians deported Israelites out of the area, they imported people from other places, and those people intermarried with the Israelites that were left. And so that meant that their race, their Israelite race, was impure. It was defiled. Now, what effect did that have for them later on?
The Israelites rejected.
Rejected by whom? Did you say? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, the Israelites rejected.
The Israelites, or the Jewish people later on, rejected them. How badly did they reject them?
They wouldn't even go through Samaria. It took a long.
Speak up.
They wouldn't even go through Samaria. They would just go take a long route around them.
Yeah, if they were going from Galilee to Judea or vice versa, Samaria's in between, the direct route, they wouldn't even take the direct route. They would cross over the Jordan River and go around on the other side and then go into Samaria. That's how much they despised the Samaritans. If by chance they did decide to go through the country of Samaria, when they got to the border, they would shake off their clothing, get all the dust and dirt of Samaria off of them before they stepped into their own country. So that's a real disdain that they have for the Samaritans. And it goes back to this. In between the time of Christ and this time, we have Nehemiah coming back from the capture of Judah into Babylon, and he comes back. He's given permission to come back and build the wall. You know something about Nehemiah, I think. He was there to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem after it had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Samaritans came down and offered to help. Because, hey, we're brothers, we're relatives, we'll help you build the wall. And Nehemiah said, no, you won't. I'm not going to let you do it. You and your ancestors have defiled yourselves, and I can't let you have a part in building the wall of God's city, the city of Jerusalem. So this went on. Now, who was it that kind of broke this terrible attitude toward the Samaritans?
Was it Jesus Christ?
Yeah. In two ways. First of all, he told a story about a guy who was injured along the road, and nobody helped him except the Good Samaritan. And then secondly, he met with a woman in Samaria and talked to her, and she became a follower of him. And people came out from the city, and they became followers of Jesus as well. And that's because Jesus now, at that point, is now presenting himself as the Savior of the world, not just of the Jewish people. Okay, so that's where the Samaritans begin. In 721, Sargon III, Ron. Sargon III was defeated in Babylon. He did go to Hamath and Egypt and put down revolts there, because the revolt's coming up here and there. You go put out a fire here and another fire starts somewhere else. So this is going to be happening from now on. In 717, he razed, that is, he leveled the city of Carchemish. And the main reason I showed that to you is because that's the home of King Midas. Have you heard of King Midas?
Even when he touches things that
Yeah, I was most of you never heard of King Midas?
I heard a guy touch stuff that's on the cold.
Yeah, King Midas is famous throughout history. The story is that everything he touched turned to gold. Now, he was a very wealthy man. He didn't have that kind of magical power, but I imagine the story arose because he had so much wealth that people said, hey, where'd he get all that? Oh, well, everything he touches turns to gold. And then that developed into a story, which I recommend. It's an interesting story, and it would help your education a little bit to know about things like that. In 709, he recaptures Babylon, and in 705, he is killed in battle. Now let's review a little bit where we've been and where we are. So we have Abraham enters Canaan, coming out of what city? Ur, right. And then Jacob ends up moving his family to Egypt, following which of his sons?
Joseph.
Right? Moses leads the Exodus from Egypt, leads the Israelites out of Egypt to the Promised Land, and Joshua takes them into the Promised Land. Then we have the period of the Judges. Then we have finally the first king of the combined united monarchy of Israel, which was who? Who was the first king?
Saul.
Saul. Who was the second king? And who's the next king?
Solomon.
Right. Under Solomon, when he dies, the kingdom is divided. The northern kingdom is called Israel. The southern kingdom is called Judah. It's not called Judea until the Romans come in later on. Judah. The king of the north, whose name was Jeroboam. The king of the south, Judah, Rehoboam. The capital of Israel was Samaria. The capital of Judah, Jerusalem. If you couldn't answer all those, you need to go back and study those. Those are things that I expect you to know. All right, so here's another map of the Assyrian Empire. You can see the extent of it from Egypt all the way up into Asia Minor and all the way over to Mesopotamia, Babylon, and so on. So, and this shows the route that they took the Israel captives all the way over here to Ecbatana area, and that's where they resettled them. All right, next we have Sennacherib. Sennacherib generally followed peaceful pursuits and concentrated on building up the city of Nineveh. And here is a relief of Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, sat on his portable throne, and the booty from Lachish passed before him. That's the inscription given here of this event. So that's Sennacherib. Sennacherib lived at the time of Hezekiah of Judah. Hezekiah, as you might remember, was a good king. In fact, he is unique in that he falls between two of the worst kings to ever rule in Judah. His father and his son were the worst. And here's Hezekiah, a shining light in between the darkness. Hezekiah repaired the temple in Jerusalem, and that helped to bring about Reformation. You can see that the people responded to this by celebrating Passover, and then further reacted by breaking down the images and the groves. The groves would be places that worshiped idols, destroyed the high places of pagan worship. They always met on these high hills. And then what did Hezekiah do further? He destroyed the bronze serpent. Now, what was the bronze serpent? What do you remember about that? Jake?
Yeah. Wasn't it the serpent that was biting all the people that Moses made, so he stopped biting all the people?
To stop what? Stop what?
All the snakes from biting the people.
I can't understand the word you're using. Stop the snakes from what?
Biting the people.
Biting?
Biting.
Oh, biting. Biting the people. Okay. I couldn't understand the word you're using there. You've got a little bit of an accent. Is that Struthers accent or Pennsylvania accent? Yeah. Pennsylvania accent, yeah. So I should have known that because I once had a Pennsylvania accent too. All right, so the poisonous snakes were biting people, and God told Moses to put up a bronze serpent or snake on a pole. And how could they be healed from their poison?
By looking at it.
By looking at the snake. Now, apparently, they've been carrying this thing around ever since then. So this is, this would be about 800 years later, 600 years later, something like that. The bronze serpent is still around. So why does Hezekiah destroy it, do you think? The idea is, why would he destroy that? People may have wept, oh, he destroyed the bronze snake. What do you think?
Because it was probably becoming like an idol to them. Like something of like safety.
Yeah. We have a tendency to do that. Something that is maybe a very religious thing, we tend to start putting that in place of God. Sometimes people do that today with pictures. They have a picture of Jesus, and pretty soon they're praying to the picture. And they have all the good intentions, but we've got to be careful about that kind of thing. Sometimes people ask me, why do you think God hasn't allowed us to find the actual ark that Noah built, or maybe even the Ark of the Covenant? We don't have that. Why don't we have that? Well, maybe this is why. If we had those things, maybe people would start worshiping those things instead of worshiping God.
If we did happen to find the Ark of the Covenant, would we still be killed if we touched it?
I don't think so, because that occurred because that was considered the dwelling place of God. So I still don't think I would do it, just in case.
Yeah.
I think I'd still put the poles in. And
I would
that way.
let someone else find out first.
Yeah, let somebody you don't like open it up and see.
Here you go.
All right. So Hezekiah destroys that. So this shows that he is going all the way in dedicating the nation to God. He's getting rid of anything that might inhibit their worship of God, even something that God told him to make. Now, one of the most impressive things he does is cutting the water conduit, taking water from the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem up into the city. So take a look at this. This drawing shows you, here's the Pool of Siloam, and they want to be able to get water up into the city without having to go outside the walls, especially. It would be very helpful in time of siege to be able to have this water tunnel going all the way up here to the city. And this is it, built during Hezekiah's time. Very impressive feat. It was dug through 1,750 feet of solid limestone. This is not just digging a ditch. They're carving into rock. Carving inch by inch through rock, solid rock.
How'd they do that back then?
I don't know. With hand tools. That's all they had for hand tools. Chisels, hammers maybe. But even that wouldn't have been metal. The hammers would probably would have been wooden. Yeah.
How long would it have taken?
I don't know that I have that. I'm not sure how long it took. But the amazing thing on top of all that is he had a group of people start down here, and a group of people start up here, and look, it's winding around. It's not even going straight. And yet, when they met each other in the middle, they were only a couple feet off. I don't know how they did that. It's remarkable. All right, so here's another drawing of it. You can see how far down the spring of Gihon is, and well, that's a Jebusite water tunnel. Here's the Pool of Siloam going up through underneath the city. Here's a drawing of the Pool of Siloam. Here's somebody walking through the tunnel. Unfortunately, I was not able to see that when I was there. I hope maybe I can return someday. But you can walk in, and so you can see how big it is. I mean, this is not just an inch wide. Of course, you wouldn't be able to keep doing that because you would be too small to get into it. But it's a major accomplishment. Phil?
So there was water going through that?
Not now.
Wouldn't it erode a bit?
Yeah, more down here than up at the top. Bill?
I saw this one documentary where like they're talking about how did the Egyptians get these pillars out of solid rock, and what they did to make it easier to dig into is they had a fire over top of it. So they could have had a fire by the thing and made the rock weaker, so they could.
I don't know if that would make limestone weaker or not. That'd be interesting to find out.
The Egyptians used granite, I think.
Yeah, that's a little different. Limestone, I think, is softer than granite,
So it could have worked.
so it would have been a little easier maybe, but I don't know anything beyond that. All right, so back to Sennacherib. Oh, by the way, let me go back to Hezekiah for a moment. Hezekiah expanded the borders of Judah at the expense of the kingdoms that had refused to join the revolt that he had been involved in before, especially in the directions of Gaza and Edom. All right, in 701, Sennacherib invaded the cities of the kings that had revolted against him, which included Judah, Phoenicia, Philistia, and all those areas were pacified. In other words, he defeated the cities of those areas.
I thought everybody liked Phoenicia.
Well, the Phoenicians had joined the revolt, so Sennacherib is not going to let anybody get away, no matter how nice they are. All right. That included the 46 strong cities, and out of those, 200,000 people were deported. Sennacherib's armies reached right up to the walls of Jerusalem, and at that point Hezekiah gave in. He didn't fight against them, and so he promised to give tribute, and Sennacherib left. In 689, Sennacherib. Oh, I want to show you this picture first. Back. This is a picture of the siege of Jerusalem. This looks like it's painted in medieval times, so it has kind of a medieval look to the soldiers and everything. But I want you to notice this. You see these two poles right here? You see what's on the poles? Yeah. So what was that called? Impaling. So here are a couple bodies impaled on these poles. In 689, Sennacherib entered and destroyed Babylon after some uprisings there. He felt that he was culturally inferior to the Babylonians, but that didn't keep him from destroying it. He destroyed it anyway. After this, he encounters an Ethiopian king that had taken over Egypt and forced him to flee. So Assyria ruled over Egypt. And he lays siege to Jerusalem once again. Now, as his soldiers are trying to communicate with the leaders of the people there, they hear them speaking in Hebrew, and Sennacherib's soldiers begin to mock them. They made fun of how they talked. And they made fun of Hezekiah and his faith in Yahweh to deliver him. Notice what Sennacherib said. He said, name just one time when any god anywhere was able to rescue his people from me. What makes you think your God can do any better? Well, the answer is Hezekiah's God is the real God. The other ones are not, right? And so Hezekiah trusted in God. And what happened? That very night, a plague went through the Assyrian army and killed many of them, such that it forced Sennacherib to leave and go home. Now, it's interesting that Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells about this. Now, he doesn't necessarily mention Israel, but he tells about an incident that sounds just like this. And it points to the fact that it may have been the bubonic plague that went through the camp. This is what Herodotus says. One night, a multitude of field mice swarmed over the Assyrian camp and devoured their quivers and their bows and the handles of their shields likewise, insomuch that they fled the next day unarmed, and many fell. Well, the reason many fell was probably because of the plague that those mice brought into camp. We know from what happened during the Middle Ages in Europe when the Black Plague went through, something they didn't understand at the time, but we know now, is that it was carried by lice or fleas on rats and mice, and they didn't affect the rats any, but when they bit humans, it gave them this disease that killed people. And that sounds similar to what probably happened here with Sennacherib. Now, what do you notice about this painting by Rubens? What the destruction of Sennacherib and his army is taking place at the direction of whom or what? An angel, the angel of death. So Rubens and the Bible both attribute the defeat of the Assyrians to God, even though he may have used natural causes. This is a really neat poem that Lord Byron wrote about this event. He says, "For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved and forever grew still. And the widows of Asher," remember Asher is the city after whom Assyria is named, "the widows of Asher are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal. And the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword, hath melted like snow in the glance of the Lord." So they weren't defeated by the sword, but by merely God looking at them, the glance of the Lord, the mighty power of God. Well, after Sennacherib returned to Assyria, there was a rebellion, and he was in a temple of Ninurta because he thought that maybe he had offended that god. That's why bad things were happening to him. And while he was in this temple, he was assassinated by one or two of his sons. Everyone thought that this was an indication of divine punishment on Sennacherib. All right, Sennacherib is followed by Ashurbanipal. Not immediately. This is a few years later. Yeah. So nothing much happened in between. Not sure who ruled in between. Ashurbanipal is ruling at the time of Manasseh, the king of Judah. And Manasseh actually joins Ashurbanipal to fight against Egypt. Interesting. And of all the leaders that were killed, they did not kill Necho, the pharaoh of Egypt. He was spared. They did destroy the Egyptian capital of Thebes. So Ashurbanipal now is ruling and taking care of the rebellions. Here are a couple of drawings of Ashurbanipal. You can see him here, and then here is a statue in the form of a sphinx. There's another one. You see the wings on the lion. I think it's a lion. And the head of a man. That's Ashurbanipal. Here's another picture of him. And here's a hippopotamus, of all things. I think that's what it is. Maybe it's a lion. No, it's a lion. Okay, take that back. It's as big as a hippopotamus, but yeah, that's a lion. They just made it really big and out of proportion. All right. At this time, Josiah becomes king of Judah. And Josiah's reign was the last period of greatness in the history of Judah. He began his reign as a boy of 8. Do you remember what you did when you were 8 years old? Was anybody ruling a country at the time? No. He reigned for 31 years. Now, at this point, Assyria has begun to go into decline. And Josiah worked to renew the kingdom of the house of David in all of Palestine. He tried to extend the rule throughout the area. Political and national restoration was encouraged through extensive religious reformation. So in other words, he saw the way to increase the prosperity of Judah was to increase their spiritual welfare. And so revival took place under Josiah, first of all, through repairing the temple. He started repairing the temple. And while they were repairing the temple, they found a copy of the law. They didn't even know where it was. They found the law. and they began reading it and read it to the people. That brought about reformation of the people. They turned their hearts toward God. They began following God. And they showed that through the obedience, particularly of celebrating Passover. So these are aspects of the revival that took place, the steps of revival that took place under Josiah. Any questions? You got them all? All right, the question arises, why did God bring such judgment on Israel and left Judah alone for a while? Well, in other words, why did Judah survive longer than Israel? Here are some answers to that question. First of all, temple worship prospered. Not all the time, but there were times at least when the people of Judah were worshiping God in the temple, whereas that did not happen in Israel at all. Remember, they had golden calves built there. There were revivals that took place under these four different kings: Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, and Josiah. There was the influence of the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, two of the longer prophetic books in the Old Testament. There was also the particular influence of Hezekiah and Josiah, two of the kings mentioned already, but especially during their reigns, a great revival took place. Then there was the unity of the kingdom because of the hereditary dynasty. In other words, in Judah, the kings were all descendants of David. They were all in that family. In Israel, it kept changing because a king would get assassinated and a new family would come in. So there was real stability here because of this. The geography of Judah was such that there were natural barriers to being invaded. Remember, on the east side there is the Dead Sea, and above that is the Jordan River. To the south is the Negev, which is the wilderness, desert. To the west is the Mediterranean Sea. And so there are natural barriers around that kept other countries from invading Judah like they did Israel. And then finally, and most importantly, there was the sovereign determination of God to preserve David's seed. God had determined he's not going to allow the seed of David to die out. And so he permitted Judah to survive longer. Okay, does everybody have those? Anybody needs me to stop? All right, if you didn't get them to somebody else, because we did move quickly to the destruction of Assyria. The destruction of Assyria. It happens quickly. Assyria goes downhill very fast. The decline and fall came with great rapidity as Egypt, first of all, freed itself from Assyria, even under the reign of Ashurbanipal. Two emerging rivals, Babylon and the Medes, contributed to the process of internal disintegration within the extensive Assyrian Empire. So within the empire, these guys are rebelling. In 626 BC, Babylon revolted and defeated the Assyrians at the borders of Babylonia. Surprisingly, Egypt came to Assyria's aid against Babylon, probably so that they could renew their rule over Palestine and Syria, and probably because they realized that Babylon was going to be the next major power. But this did not hold the tide for long. In 614, the army of the Medes conquered the city of Ashur, and 2 years later, Nineveh fell before a combined attack of Medes and Babylonians. In 610, Haran was also captured, and at that point, Assyria ceased to exist. Now, while you're writing that, let me tell you a couple of things happening elsewhere at the same time. In India, the Upanishads were composed, which is the foundation of Hinduism. So that's when Hinduism begins. And something else at the same time, there was a scientist philosopher by the name of Thales in Greece that suggested that the earth was round. All right, tomorrow we're going to have a quiz over Assyria. The names I know are difficult. I'm going to give them to you. You won't have to, remember how to spell them and stuff. You'll have those. So study for quiz tomorrow over Assyria. Any questions?
shrunk from the last time you measured. I measured a couple days ago.
You're gonna shrunk since then. I mean, Bruce.
You're 5'6" still?
Yeah.